The idea from the UCI, led by Mr. Lapartien, is for each team to have 6 cyclists, with the number of teams increasing to 25 in each Grand Tour. Great. And we start these 10 minutes of individual time trial with a summary of the most important news from the world of cycling. Today, June 28th. And we do it precisely with those ideas that Mr. Lapartien has made public in a meeting with Warner executives and the sports channels that depend on this company. And there he stated that new solutions needed to be found for cycling. And among them, he suggested the possibility of reducing to 6 the number of cyclists who could participate per team in the Grand Tours. This would imply implementing the possibility of allowing up to 25 teams to compete. Also creating a salary cap to avoid unfair competition. This and other measures have come under scrutiny. Let's start then with the most urgent matter. And these are the results of the national championships that have been replicated in nearly 60 countries over these 4 days of competition, both in the time trial and in the road race. The most important ones are perhaps summed up in the victory of Wilco Kelderman for the Netherlands, the Visma rider and the rider Romain Grégoire from Groupama in France, from Joan Cambrubi, a surprise from Pinarello Q365 in Spain, and we had already told you yesterday about Jonathan Milak. Evase, who for the Czech Republic and Lidl Trek has also achieved this victory. Meanwhile, in Slovakia, it was the rider Luke Kudis, the cyclist from Rockets de Tetiema, who achieved that victory in the road race. And so in a large number of countries where this competition has been taking place, a great debate has been generated that has been going on for years. But this time, because of the absence of riders who are preparing for the Tour de France, it has once again set social media on fire about whether participation should be mandatory or not of the main World Tour riders in their national championships. While there is a wide representation of cyclists from different teams, especially those with larger rosters, for example, UAE has been able to present a large number of riders in different national competitions. Lidl Trek has done it, Pinarello has done it, NSN has done it, which has practically taken all the victories in the championships from Israel. And well, this opens up the discussion again about the suitability of the dates or the situation in the organization of these national championships. And the discussion opens up about whether they should be moved to the end of the season so that the largest number of riders from the teams could participate. World Tour, after all. They are the ones who have the greatest chances of winning these kinds of competitions. However, some critical voices have said that there will always be some excuse to avoid their presence in these competitions, considering how difficult the calendars are, and especially the issue of mobility. There are riders who practically spend their entire season in Europe and then have to travel to various places in Africa, America, and Oceania. And well, that's how it is. It also makes it much more difficult for some of them to participate. However, those who want this to be organized in a way that is almost mandatory by the federations of the different countries, they use as an example what happens in Latin America, where they are held at the beginning of the calendar year. And this would allow many runners who are actually doing their preseason training at that time, they could take these 4 or 5 days a week to attend the national championships and do a kind of preseason precisely by relying on the national championships, which would also, in a way, create a virtuous circle because it would allow the presence of most of the cyclists from those nations. And in turn, throughout the whole year, they would wear the national champions jersey. That is to say, a lot would be gained, a lot more compared to the current date when it's held, as we've seen, at the end of June, right before the Tour de France begins. And the proposal that's being made for it to coincide by a week or two with the European Championships or the World Championships, this would also complicate preparation, as some may skip the national championships to focus on the World Championships and so on. However, the possibility of it being at the beginning of the calendar year would indeed open up a very important opportunity. So, well, with these results, yesterday we talked to you about those results that have also happened in other countries. Today, Longo Borghini has reclaimed her Italian championship, meaning that the UAE team rider continues to reign in that category. Meanwhile, Shari Bossoud, she did it in Belgium. Well, what's important now is the proposal made by Mr. Lapartian from the International Cycling Union about the salary cap to prevent the big teams and big capital from sweeping up all the cyclists, and to avoid a kind of the democratization of victories and the presence of teams in the most important races, which is where there they have more advertising impact, and logically that's where advertisers are most interested in putting their money so that it becomes profitable. And this has led to some proposals that go hand in hand precisely with that salary cap, so that in some way the number of top riders can be further diversified, allowing them to be on teams other than the big four, and in this way democratize the victories so that they are not monopolized by one organization. And the second one, which is even more controversial, because let's remember that in the Tour de France, the number of riders was already reduced. It used to be 10 per team. There were 20 teams. So 200 riders. It was reduced to 8 cyclists to make room for more teams, expanded to 22 teams for a total of 176 riders. Now, the proposal from the Union Cycliste Internationale is to reduce the number of cyclists per squad, per team, to 6, so that 25 teams could participate in each of these 3 major races of the year, especially the Tour de France, which attracts the most interest and logically has the greatest advertising impact throughout the year. So that would be a possibility they would have to consider, not only from the International Cycling Union, but also with the race organizers, with Unipublic, with ASO, and with RCS, who are the owners of these competitions, and of many others that would logically be covered by this measure, in which logically the World Tour category races would have that implementation for obvious reasons, almost as a priority. So, with all these proposals, it has put this discussion on the table so that the races don't end up being, as we said, monopolized by the same teams, by the same runners who are, in the end, the ones who are going to take the victories. And second, that there is a greater presence of top level cyclists in the national championships that take place in different parts of the world. As we told you today, up to 60 nations have had competitions in their men's, women's, also World Tour Junior and under 23 categories. Finally, let me remind you that Magnus will be the champion of Denmark this year. He will wear the Danish champion's jersey. The rider from Uno 1X has announced that this will be his last Tour de France, which will start on the 4th, and that at the end of the season. This icon of Danish cycling will retire from cycling. So, with this news, we are also getting closer to the announcements of which riders will be there. Well, as he's starting at the end of this week, as the Tour de France is about to begin. In the meantime, I invite you to join me on a bike ride. I am Iñaki Berrueta.